Hello, I'm Jody Wolf, and you're watching Expoz, July 23, 2018, 1:24 a.m., Birmingham. And topic is, I started last night, and something I saw in Houston and San Antonio, Texas, Wednesday p.m. And then I run across another blog. It's all written out. The guy's not talking, so I'm just reading. But you got to hear this. And then I'm going to tell you what I saw. It's going to make you set up. A Venezuelan prepper looks back, things I would have done differently if I had known what was coming. Having overcome a few personal incidents that rocked this boat these past few weeks, and keep in mind, this is posted on the 11th this month. I want to write now about one of the most important experiences regarding the physiological aspect of prepping. Now, well, I won't go into my views. Looking back as a Venezuelan prepper, there are things I would have done differently had I known what was coming my way. And he's naturally talking Venezuela. And enduring what we have gone through, even after having a proper approach to prepping, some sort of conventional, in a sense, Gensets, water tanks, storage capacities, dry supplies for a few months, and other stuff. All of these things are into the field of the conventional and regular prepping. And he goes in to talk about off-road vehicles, perhaps, or at least a vehicle in good enough shape to take a beating up to a retreat, or up to the retreat, radios, and some food production, in particular merchandisable skills. And he says, I lack a little bit of the field of manual arts like pottery and painting, but maybe it's just me. He said, I can change a tire in record time. And so I'm having to scroll down as I do this, by the way. And which is an art by itself, especially in a Venezuelan, where the roads or in Venezuela, where the roads are plagued with thugs. Not only thugs, where the roads themselves are just, well, they're just paths, trails, and potholes. But this is the stuff that any person concerned about self-reliance should have covered. But next, we have to try to imagine what could be on the horizon that we never considered. And this is where we're headed, guys. Things that we've not considered. And I'm not talking about prepping for every conceivable threat. That's just not possible nor practical. What I want is that you imagine what your action course would be just in case the worst, or just in case your worst scenario, one so bad that you couldn't even imagine would take place. For those who have not read my former articles, I used to have a pretty good life, a regular life, pretty good according to our standards in Venezuela, a good and well-paying job, medical insurance, school at 10 minutes on foot, that close, for a kiddo, a sushi restaurant next to a pizza delivery in 5 minutes on foot, and so on. In other words, like we are today, right here, like I'm in Birmingham, all these things. If I want to walk there, I can walk there. They're 10 minutes away from me, and driving a minute. And but he's talking about what else could you ask for? It was all great until the apocalypse started. how to identify this threshold is not easy for me nowadays. The more I research, the more I realize that my planning, action, and conception of this thing for such a long, long time, my generation didn't have a chance. He said I could not have prevented it, regardless what I did, how I planned, and although we were teenagers unable to hold a gun, he said these things you don't think about, but these things you wish to God, the consequences would be foreseeable for sure for those who have lived through it already and had access to some information. Some people like meeting up, perhaps some leftist candidate for winning an election and slowly washing the face of the communists, or washing the face to the communists, the real bad guys, I mean. But definitely the most alarming sign was the food rationing. Guys, think about that. The food rationing. This is where it starts. He said that was the cherry of the pie. And he said, but definitely the most alarming warning sign was that. I mean, they got you when they start to ration food to you. They took over this country, people included, again, in a country where the food production was once an industry, and at a level importing packaged food, box by box, for the leftist elite. If there is something left, then it goes to the inferior members. Real vulnerable people got nothing, and that is why they are dying today. They started with the education system, and these are the ones that took them over, trying to sell to the populist sociopaths like Stalin and Lenin as heroes of their country, making attempts to the Marxist ideologically. I can't hardly see it. Look like the Holy Grail. Their way of thinking is like the Holy Grail, and they're trying to pass that along to you. They had permeated the national universities all over the country. By the way, fight against imperialism was their motto, whatever that was. And many of the fanatics, and we see this today, like the people who are conservatives that they don't want speaking in any California university, they're willing to burn down half the university to keep them out. And you saw that recently. They hesitate and mention the Anglo-Saxon Empire, the USA, and so on. Never define their borders. Never could identify that enemy. That is not surprising given the general level of education in the barrios where most of the people used to live. Private schooling was different, very different. One of the most reputed schools is called Emil Friedman under the general scenario, and with that dangerous little island, an expert in exporting revolution and crime member Mario, I guess we don't know these people, but their fellow preppers in Miami certainly should, for all of this was predicted by some people. The bad news, you know what? You got my point here. You really have. And what it was like to realize everything had changed. Imagine you're a Venezuelan and you don't have a profit or job anymore, and you still have a family to support. There's no engine oil. And God forbid one of your tires should blow out. A belt on your engine costs several times your weekly salary. This is a fan belt, guys. And the parts factories have been overtaken by a mixed mafia military, Leo-dishonest civilians, and won't sell at the regulated prices. This happened in Russia. I remember reading about it in the Reader's Digest eons ago. Hyperinflation begins. He says you don't have to go, or you don't have a place to go, because the situation, daily living, did not allow you to build a compound in a safe place that was large enough to be sustainable. Now, I'm going to stop that. And the reason is this leads to what I saw in Houston and what I saw in San Antonio. I'm driving through, and I see to my left, as I'm approaching Houston, the largest neighborhood. I thought they were friggin' sand dunes, guys. As far as I could see, I kept looking, and I kept holding my iPhone up and trying to film it. That's not houses. It can't be. There's hills of sand with windows in it. And that's what I was seeing. Thousands upon thousands of houses. And they're packed so tightly, it means one thing. They're very small, and they're for small family units. And that's not the worst of it. I keep driving. And then later on in the evening, I come into San Antonio. This, once again, mirrored what I just saw in Houston. And I'm not talking about one side. I'm talking about both sides of the road. To the left before I got in Houston, and to the right when I passed Houston. But then when I get to San Antonio, what I just saw was small. San Antonio, to my right, I saw something I've only seen in pictures. And where did I see these pictures? I see these pictures of China. I see these pictures of the surrounding states or countries bordering Russia that used to be part of Russia. Bulgaria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Armenia, all these countries that have stacks upon stacks upon stacks of apartment buildings. They're in San Antonio today, and they're building like crazy. What, they can't possibly have that many Hispanics come over in such a short time and do this much, unless there's a reason for it. To cram people into the inner cities because you don't make enough, because like this guy in Venezuela, because it was all taken away, because hyperinflation, because a fan belt cost you 2 weeks' salary, and you can't buy a quart of oil for your car because there's not any oil to be had. There are no supermarkets anymore. The stores are empty. Try to imagine what these people in North Korea have and see today. They don't have supermarkets. The very elite goes to these supermarkets, and even they stand in lines and go by the numbers, and only a few are allowed in the store at a time. And their choice is you can go in through a Quick Mart that has more in it than Walmart size store would in North Korea. Get that. Try to picture that. You walk down an aisle that's got bread on it, and you might have a dozen loaves, all state made. You get to an aisle with tissue paper, and you might find a few rows of cardboard, state made. You get on down for a part for your car. Forget that. You don't have a car. You might have a tube for your bicycle, but you can't afford it. Guys, we have a man put in place by our God. He stopped Hillary Clinton from turning this nation over on a silver platter to the UN and to the Pope and named it and called it Agenda 21. You know what that is? That is socialism on a platter. Instantly. And this is when all the houses in the suburbs are bulldozed and all the people are forced into inner cities from a 2,800 square foot house to a 280 square foot apartment. Think about that. It has begun. I read first a year and a half ago that the goal under Agenda 21 was to build multiple 14-story buildings. What has this in common with anything? The price of beans in China? No, not the price of beans, but the size of the buildings to the T. Look up anywhere. Look at the giant inner cities in China and in Russia, even in Japan, Cuba. See that they all live in apartments, except a few. Why? Because they run out of space in the inner city. So the few that had the money were allowed to stay outside the city. And outside, I mean a few blocks. Look, when the Iron Curtain fell, when Reagan said to Gorbachev, take down that wall, the people that were hiding in East Germany, it took them years to come out. They were terrified. They've been brainwashed so badly, they were terrified. Just like North Korea thinks today that every American is set up to come in there and slaughter them and eat their babies. I'm telling you, this is what brainwashing at its best gets you. Scares the hell out of you, and it lasts forever. Except we know better. We have, number one, we have an almighty God that placed a president in our country for us. And we have an almighty God that says, I ain't ready for the United States to fall. He brought up Trump for this time. Even Trump himself couldn't believe he's doing what he's doing. Who in their right mind would put their billion-dollar empire on hold, knowing that it could go away? To come in and get beat up every day by a bunch of socialist, communist idiots. People who comes in and tells you, I run this place, you don't. We heard that from Comey. We hear it today, every day from Rosenstein. Mueller, we run this place, you don't. Got news for you guys. You're part of the stinkingest part of the skunk swamp there is, and you're going down. We're not ready to give up our country. Not for you or anyone else. Guys, I'm not done. I'll be back. Jody Wolf Expoz.